the update, please utilize the chat, and I will put any names and titles in there as they are called upon. We have several Division of Wildlife staff and Scenic Rivers staff with us in case a question warrants that area of expertise. So at the end, if we don't get to your question, I will leave my email address so you guys can all follow up with me with anything we don't get to. So for now, I'm going to hand it over to ODNR Director Mary Mertz.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Mary Mertz, Director of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And today I'd like to give you an update on the status of aquatic life in the waterways near the derailment site. But first, I'd like to give you a little bit of background. So the morning after the train derailment in East Palestine, ODNR wildlife personnel and officers responded to survey the waterways to determine the impact of the chemical spill on aquatic life. Upon arrival, the Ohio EPA advised our teams that it was too dangerous to enter the water without specialized gear and the proper equipment. In response, ODNR requested the help of an environmental consulting firm that was already on site working to contain the spill. And so under the direction of the Division of Wildlife, EnviroScience, the consultant there at the time, which had the appropriate equipment and protection, proceeded to use our standard methodology to survey the waterways for dead aquatic species. So procedures for fish kill investigations over a watershed are based on science. And these scientific methods include the collection of data and specimens as soon as possible, which is what happened here. 4 different collection stations were established to gather the necessary data, which in this case was dead aquatic species. We had 2 to 3 officers monitoring that collection during the course of the survey. Dead fish were collected in the 4 designated survey spots by entering the water and using a dip net. Following collection, EnviroScience identified, counted, measured, and then arranged for the disposal of the aquatic species to limit the impact to other wildlife that might feed on those affected aquatic species. So this collection occurred over 2 days, on February 6th and February 7th. Now, we've previously reported that approximately 3,500 dead aquatic species comprised primarily of minnows and small fish were observed. And that estimate was based on visual observation of the species collected over that 2-day period at those survey sites. But once all of the actual data was collected from the various survey sites and the information was organized on spreadsheets, that number has now been confirmed to total 2,938 aquatic species, so a little bit less than the initial estimate. Of this sample, around 2,200 were small minnows, 1 to 3 inches. The other 25% of those species collected were other fish, amphibians, crayfish, other macroinvertebrates. So that is the sample. So after receiving that final sample number of collected dead aquatic species, ODNR wildlife investigators then applied a science-based calculation, one endorsed by the American Fisheries Society, applied it to that number to determine the estimated total number of dead aquatic species, including those likely still in the water. So we applied this calculation to what we discovered during the survey sample. So again, we have the sample number of collected species, and we have to use this calculation to determine the total estimated number. So once the calculation is applied, we would estimate that over the affected site, a total of 38,222, what we would refer to as minnows, were potentially killed as a result of the derailment. So these minnows are small fish, 1 to 3 inches, and that is what our calculation shows. In addition to that, it's estimated somewhere around another 5,550 other species, fish, other fish, crayfish, amphibians, other macroinvertebrates were also potentially killed as a result of the derailment. I know that's a lot of numbers, and I'm happy to walk through that again if anyone needs help sort of figuring out where those numbers fall out. So since then, additional work has been completed to remove more dead fish from the water, although that removal is not part of the survey. So in conclusion, the investigation has concluded that of the 7.5-mile impacted area, species were killed over a 5-mile span, and that the total area of impact runs from the train derailment site near Sulphur Run through Leslie Run to where Bull Creek flows into the North Fork of Little Beaver Creek. So that's the area that we were looking at. In the days that followed the survey samples, officers searched beyond the impacted waterways, checking the Ohio River down through Jefferson County, and at the Cumberland Lock and Dam. We have not observed any dead aquatic life in those areas. It's important to stress that these small fish that we did find are all believed to have been killed immediately after the derailment. We haven't seen any signs of fish in distress since that time. So because the chemicals were contained, we haven't seen any additional signs of aquatic life suffering. And in fact, we have seen live fish already return to Leslie Run. ODNR continues to believe that none of the species killed in this event are in the threatened or endangered category. We did receive reports on 3 birds and an opossum. We submitted those animals to the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and they have just reported back to us today that they didn't find any evidence of chemical poisoning. So we have no reason to believe that those terrestrial animal deaths were as a result of the spill. We are continuing to monitor and assess the environmental impact during cleanup. We'll have officers and personnel, we have them out there every day now looking to see if anything additional might happen that has not occurred. And so now we'd be happy to open it up to your questions.
First question, Director. How long will it take for the ecological system to recover?
That's a great question. I know we don't have an answer to that. Something we've discussed, and you know, each spill that occurs is unique and different, and we will monitor it. But I can't. If I tried to give you a timeline on that, I'm confident it wouldn't be accurate. So we will be closely watching it. Like I said, we're happy to see that live fish have already returned to Leslie Run. That's a great sign. The fact that we're not seeing any fish in distress is a great sign. But at this point, we aren't able to put a timeline on that.
We've got a question from Ashley at Fox 19. Is it safe to eat fish out of the Ohio River and these creeks?
Out of the Ohio River? Absolutely. We don't have any, we had no signs of a fish kill in distress, you know, further than Bull Creek. And so we don't have any reason to think there is an issue there.
All right. A Hellbender restoration site is downstream from the derailment. Was there any impact there?
Not that we know of. In fact, I went to see that site. We have been watching that Hellbender release site. So, you know, a Hellbender is an endangered species, and so we have been concerned, and it wouldn't be obvious that they either died or suffered distress. It will require some technology to track what's going on with those Hellbenders. We're working with a university now to bring that technology into place so we can survey and see if there has been any damage. We haven't seen anything yet. We don't have any reason to think it's there, but we're gonna, you know, follow this out to the end and use some technology to check on those Hellbenders that have been released there that have trackers, as well as continue to diligently look for other evidence that might have happened. But at this point, we have no evidence of that.
From WKBN, we've received reports of fresher fish dying in Leslie Run. How can you tell the difference between a fish that's been dead for a while and one that died recently?
So when you say recently, I assume you mean, you know, some days after the spill. So we have had officers and personnel on site every day, and we haven't seen any evidence of distress since the spill occurred, right? So our belief, based on everything we've seen, and we have been looking in great detail, was that this was an immediate kill. So we haven't seen any fish that have died since then. So I think that would lead us to believe if they've died since then, that would be of other causes. We've got people out there every day and we're not seeing that.
So we've got something from Local 12. What is the impact on other species that feed on and interact with the species that were lost?
Well, so as I said, we haven't seen an impact, right? I think people might have assumed we would see that. So we collected reports about 3 birds and an opossum, and even though we didn't think those were the result of it, we took them down to the Department of Ag Lab. They did their testing, and now we feel it's confirmed that they were not a result of the spill. In an abundance of caution, the other dead fish that were not part of the survey sample, they have been mostly removed. These are very small fish, so I'm sure, you'll find 1 or 2 here or there still in the water. So we don't have a high level of concern on that now because we haven't seen any terrestrial animals suffer from what's happened. We removed those, like I said, in an abundance of caution, the other dead fish in the creeks, but we haven't seen any impact of that.
Is there a good way to compare the danger of chemicals to fish to any potential danger to humans?
I don't know of a good way to compare that. I think, as we know, in certain circumstances, not here, but in other places, we do have fish advisories when we think it's merited. So when we think there is an issue with fish in Lake Erie or fish in the Ohio River, in consultation with the Department of Health, we will issue what we think is an appropriate consumption level. So when we do have a concern, we share that broadly. We don't have that here at this time. I don't know if my other staff have more to share on that. Give me a nod, but I don't. That is not the case here. So any other direct comparison, I don't have for you.
21 News is asking, will the fish ever be restocked?
So most often we restock fish in lakes, right? So species that cannot self-regenerate, which is always what we hope they can do. We like to get it to a level where self-regeneration is the situation there. I don't know that we've ever stocked fish in these waterways, or we would. Maybe as assistant, I have an assistant chief, Pete Novotny, on here. Pete, do you want to speak to this for a moment, where that stocking might occur?
Sure, Director. So yes, as the Director said, we normally, on stream sizes this small, would not stock any of the species that were impacted by the pollution. So everywhere else, whether it's in the Ohio River or in some of our inland lakes, that is where the majority of our stocking take place.
So.
Okay. So go ahead.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. Next question. How long will ODNR personnel be on site?
So currently we have several people there every day, led by Pete Novotny and our district manager out there, Scott Angelo. In the weeks to come, we'll reassess the need. We might move from 1 day to every other day. Happy to introduce you to the person leading the team out there. Scott Angelo is on this call as well. Scott, if you want to speak to what you think the schedule will be in the coming weeks. Please switch over to Scott.
Yes, thank you, Director. As the Director stated, we do have staff there every day currently. We might, as we look going forward, change that to every other day. It is kind of flexible. We have been working with the Ohio EPA and their emergency response. We have great communication with them, and we will kind of ask them what the conditions are and kind of tailor our response to that. So I would say it's safe to say for the next 2 to 3 weeks we will have staff continuing to monitor. We do have an officer that is assigned to that county that will be there in perpetuity in the county. So I think it would be safe to say for the next several weeks we definitely will have staff, and we'll evaluate that in consultation with the Ohio EPA and what the cleanup status is.
The next question is, how did you determine to study the 7.5 mile area?
I think we had officers go out with visual observation on where the potential kills were. We'd initially identified even more survey sites, so we'd initially identified a number of sites over the course of the water, but upon further observation determined there wasn't enough there to sample. They were if you did see a dead fish, it was a floater from an earlier area, and we would get a better sample size at those 4. So the 7.5 was really based on visual observation and those waterways where we thought there would be a potential impact.
We're getting a lot of questions about pets, and I just wanted to refer that to the fact that if pets show symptoms, we should call their local veterinarian. That does not fall under ODNR. Just to reiterate that, I've been answering some of these on the side. Next question, will the railroad be billed for the officer's time and expenses?
They will. So under Ohio law, when there is a take or a kill of wildlife, ODNR has both civil and criminal remedies. And so one of the reasons we do the estimate of the total aquatic species killed is to give us a number for restitution. So that restitution will include not only the wildlife that were taken, but the time invested by all of our staff in the investigation. So there will be a fulsome restitution number that we will work with Ohio's Attorney General on, as well as ask them to review the potential for criminal penalties as part of their overall review of what liabilities that Norfolk Southern will have in this case.
All right, Matt Markey from the Toledo Blade. What about residual impact on the waterways, dangerous chemicals settling into the stream bed as a legacy threat?
So in some ways, Matt, a lot of that is the Ohio EPA. So they're engaged in some, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I've heard them explain it a few times, engaged in pretty significant soil sampling and soil removal. We work really closely. We have a lot of respect for our Ohio EPA colleagues, and I know we will work with them as this progresses if we have any concerns about, legacy issues in the waterways. But I know the intention now is to engage in, a whole lot of testing, a whole lot of understanding where chemicals may have settled, sediment removal. You have to weigh that against other disturbances, were things that might happen when you remove those sediments. But, in Ohio, we're no stranger to removal of toxic sediments in a variety of places. So I know we'll be working with Ohio EPA to be sure that we are as health conscious as possible in that regard.
Do you have a sense of what the cost will be for restitution?
A sense of it. We have not collected our officer hours or effort or that piece of it yet. Ohio has had similar size fish kills in the past. This is not something that's going to range in the millions of dollars. That's not what Ohio law provides for here. So it'll be, it will be a smaller sum than that for sure. we haven't added it all up, so I hate to give you a number and then come back with a different one. I don't want to be inaccurate, but for this sort of a wildlife loss, it's not going to be, you know, the kind of liability they're facing for the other transgressions here.
Stephanie from ABC News, do you expect the long-term impacts to the area from this amount of animal deaths in the streams?
Well, we hope not. You know, the expectation, this will continue for a while. I mean, ecosystem restoration is not instantaneous. And I know the very first question was, how long do we expect that ecosystem restoration to take? And I can't give you a number. We know it won't be quick. Like I said, we're very encouraged that we've already seen some live fish back in Leslie Run. But I'm sure it's something we're going to watch for a long time. I think, you know, with the testing that will occur and the commitment to make a difference, I'm going to say we're confident we're going to bring it back. It's going to come back. Ohio's natural areas are resilient, and so it will come back with care, and we do expect a full recovery eventually, and we're going to keep sharp eyes on it because this is a very important area to us. As you know, these waterways lead down into the Beaver Creek, which is a scenic river, one of our most precious rivers, and so we will be keeping a very close eye and ensuring that we do have a full recovery eventually.
Director, can you clarify the total number of dead fish and some of the species that were found, please?
Yeah, I know there were a lot of numbers there. So let's start with the survey. Of the 4 survey sites, pulled up 2,938 aquatic species. Most of those were minnows, you know, little 1 to 3 inch, what we refer to as minnows. So about 2,200 of those were minnows. Once we applied the calculation to determine a total estimated kill, the total number we arrived at is a little over 43,000. So 43,785 aquatic species. Now, remember this, I gave you a very precise number, but this is an estimate, right? This is math. So it's not quite as precise as it sounds. It's after the application of a formula. But that's the total number. Out of that, the vast majority were fish, handfuls of other things. Most were fish, and most, you know, over 38,000 were minnows.
Okay, I believe this is Matt Markey again. A biologist from Pennsylvania reported Leslie Run is devoid of any aquatic life with thousands of dead macroinvertebrates. Is that accurate?
Well, there were thousands of dead small fish. That I can confirm because we were part of the survey and I know they were removed. Thousands of dead macroinvertebrates I cannot speak to. We know there were some. Our modeling shows not nearly that many. It is not devoid of life because we've had officers out there that have seen some life there. So I rely on and respect the eyes of our officers who are on the ground constantly there, and they've seen live fish. So maybe his estimate was before we saw our live fish. I don't know when he was out there. You know, if he was out there February 7th, maybe that was the case a couple of days after the incident, but that is not the case now.
We've got Susan from the Ohio Capital Journal. You say these minnows are very small, but could you talk about what the impact from an environmental standpoint of losing these fish and how that might impact the food chain overall for aquatic life, if any?
Well, probably going to refer to one of my colleagues here, but you know, I mean, suffice to say, at the Department of Natural Resources, I mean, we value every bit of wildlife. So I want to start with that. I was just trying to put it in context by describing these very small minnows, to be honest about what they were, right? They're the things you see people use for bait. It's that kind of thing. And again, there's no belief that any of our threatened or endangered species, fish species, amphibians, that they have been impacted. Where they are in the food chain, Peter, Scott, which one of you would like to elaborate on that? We're going to go with Assistant Chief Pete Novotny. If you want to elaborate a little bit on these minnows in the food chain.
Sure. Thank you, Director. So, of course, you know, when the food chain's affected, whether it's small invertebrates, small minnows, these tributaries, we're talking about very small streams. During that recovery process, you know, the food chain's going to redevelop itself, and we aspire to a healthy ecosystem and a healthy stream system. The food chain, the good thing about this is that immediately south of these tributaries that were impacted, we're seeing healthy fish and a healthy, you know, and as our monitoring is taking place, we're comfortable in providing an avenue where the Leslie Run is going to be a recoverable stream, and it will be restored.
Any additional questions, Stephanie?
Yes, we've got a couple more. For the species that feed on the fish that were lost and perhaps the buildup of algae or otherwise, that these 38,000 fish fed on, sorry, that's a little bit, what would be the impact to other aquatic species?
Yeah, so I think that's what Pete just tried to talk about a little bit, the food chain. And, you know, I mean, that's a difficult question to answer with any precision, right? So we have looked at this stream. We have seen streams like this regenerate. We are confident with careful protection that will happen. Will there be a short-term impact? Perhaps, because obviously, you know, some of the larger fish feed on some of the smaller fish. So in the short term, we might see some impact. But we don't anticipate that's going to be, you know, a barrier or problem for the long term. You mentioned the minnows. On the macroinvertebrates. We also have Matthew Smith from our Scenic Rivers program on here, and maybe I'll call on Matthew. So Matthew's job is to protect the most precious of our waterways, and so he is very engaged in working with maintaining our most precious waterways, like the Little Beaver Creek. And I don't know if you have a comment you could add that would help the understanding on that, Matthew.
Sure, thank you, Director. When we discuss Leslie Run, that is a small tributary, and it really can't support large size fish for the most part. So when we talk about minnow species, you may have a creek chug, may be one of the larger species in that section of the stream. I don't know what the full assessment was through there, so but the vast majority of species through that section were minnow sized fish. But we did see, like the director had said, we did see live macroinvertebrates towards the Nagley area in Leslie Run. We do see them, variety of different types, and we continue to monitor those things. So fish are moving back in Bull Creek. We did witness some variegated darters in Bull Creek, in the section where we found some dead fish.
Thank you. We've got a couple questions.
Stephanie?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions just about the quality of the water. One is asking if people should allow their pets to go in and drink in the affected waterways. The other's asking about if it's safe to do recreation out there at this time.
So as far as the Ohio EPA is our lead agency in testing water quality, and so I would like to leave that question to them. I think they have the most up-to-date information. They're the ones in the water doing the testing, and I think they should answer that question. I don't want to misspeak if I don't have the latest, and they would have that. As far as recreating in these rivers, so So let's talk about Sulphur Run and Leslie Run. These really are less recreational rivers anyway. They're very small. These, you know, until you get down to Little Beaver Creek, it's not like you're kayaking or really probably even fishing in these. You know, Sulphur Run is more like a channelized waterway through the town, much of it culvertized. So it's less of a recreational asset. Leslie Run, I've seen, is a very shallow, fairly narrow waterway as well. You know, the only recreation I could probably see there is wading and catching bugs. And probably nobody wants to do that right now, but I do want to leave the answer to the question about the current water quality to the people that have done the most recent up-to-date tests, and that's Ohio EPA. But I think recreating on the Little Beaver Creek, I don't, you know, that is an area where you might start to get out there, and I don't know that there are any restrictions in place currently.
How long will the cleanup of the dead wildlife take, or is it done? And how long do you anticipate that a review with the AG might take?
So I believe, as far as we're concerned, that cleanup is complete. Like I said, these are very small fish. So, you know, you're going to go out there and see one or two here or there. We don't see an ecological reason or a concern that we need to, you know, fish out every one of these. You know, that would be impossible because some are covered by mud. But most of the clean out at this point, we believe, is complete. But like I said, we'll continue to monitor and see if anything else needs to be done. The review with the AG, that is something, I mean, I am confident he has a lot of different approaches and causes of action to review, and I wouldn't want to speculate on that. I would leave that to the Attorney General's office to answer.
Are you concerned that this will spread, and is there a way to spread any further chemical contamination?
At this point, we are not concerned. What we've seen is the chemicals dissipate, but that's why we still have people out there. We don't think it will. We don't have any reason to think it will. Like I said, we see signs of life returning. We have seen the data that Ohio EPA has provided about the dissipation of the chemicals, and so we don't think it'll spread. No reason, but we want to be there for the people of the region, and we're going to continue watching until there's absolutely no doubt. But we don't have any reason to think it'll spread further.
Just about 3 more questions here. Pete, this one is actually directed at you. Could you explain what killed the sculpins, darters, and shiners, and how did the chemicals kill the fish?
So we know the chemicals in the waterway cause an immediate impact to our aquatic species. You know, whether lethal dose, we did not test to see what the lethal doses were, but it was apparent that from this incident that it had killed these aquatic wildlife immediately. And so we didn't go any further testing to determine the lethal doses of the chemical that entered the streams.
Thank you. So is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on site monitoring the incident, and what is done with the 43,000 species removed?
They are not on site. You know, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is often our partner in many things. That authority is state authority to respond to and recover from this kind of a fish kill. So they are not on site and wouldn't expect them to be. And I'm sorry, Stephanie, what was the second part of the question?
Sorry, what is done with the species picked out of the water?
So EnviroScience, the consultant, was tasked with disposal. And I'm looking at my folks. I don't know if you all know what their disposal method was. Anybody have an answer? But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know.
Is anybody good, or should I just go? We have one more question.
Let's go with one more.
Alrighty. Has ODNR learned from this experience how to better handle any future such incident?
I'm looking at my colleagues who were on site more immediately. You know, these type of incidents aren't necessarily uncommon. The causes of them, you know, aren't necessarily a rail derailment with this type of chemical, but these do happen around the state. Not frequently, but they happen every year. There are a number of incidents. They might be small fish kills. They might be very large. This is not probably the largest Ohio has experienced. You know, it wasn't that long ago we had a similar sized fish kill for a different reason in a different part of the state. And I think what we know is we can count on and enjoy working with our Ohio EPA colleagues. They've always been excellent partners on the ground. The communication on that field is second to none. I think that happened again this time. Do either of you have anything to add to that? But I mean, this is what we do. We respond to these, we assess them, we figure out what we need to do, what the assessment is on recovery. This is our job. Yeah, I'm not getting a Scott. Would you like to add to that response?
Yes, Director. Yeah, I think from any situation that's unique, you take a few things away from that can lead to better performance. But I will say that, you know, our work with the Ohio EPA has always been good. My staff have been, you know, I guess a little bit exhausted through this process, but they've done great work. Confidence, I have very much confidence in their work. We've worked with Matthew Smith as well in this process. And, you know, I'm comfortable with our response, but there always are a few little things. But this isn't an abnormal, you know, fish kills are something that we investigate. I've been at this for nearly 2 decades and been on a number of fish kills. And I'm, you know, I'm proud of our staff for what they've done to this point. And they care about the resource, just like the director said. They protect this resource every day by putting on their badge and gun to go out there and patrol. And in this instance, I think they did the exact same thing in this situation.
Okay. Anything else, Stephanie?
Nope, I think we are good. We are going to wrap this up now. I sent a couple messages for people to email me some follow-ups, and I have some things that'll help. I put my email address in the chat, as well as a link to some video of some live aquatic species that we found we have them on our Flickr page. So any follow-ups, feel free to email. We will try to answer as best we can. And thank you guys all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.